The thunder of hooves echoed across the barren landscape as Amelia Benson's heart pounded in her chest. The precipitous drop of Devil's Gorge yawning behind her, while 5 snarling outlaws closed in from the front. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman alone, but circumstances had forced her hand. And now death seemed certain as she clutched her father's pocket watch and whispered a final prayer. Amelia hadn't planned to end up at the edge of a cliff with a gang of ruthless men blocking her escape. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd been safely ensconced in her modest home in Boston, teaching music to well-bred young ladies and living a predictable life. Then the telegram had arrived, bearing news of her uncle's death in Humboldt, Nevada, and the unexpected inheritance of his silver claim. "Nowhere left to run, little lady," called the leader of the gang, a brute named Silas Porter whose face was carved with a jagged scar from temple to chin. "Hand over them claim papers, and maybe we'll let you walk away." Amelia's fingers tightened around the leather satchel containing the deed to the Silver Moon mine. Uncle Jeremiah had left everything to her, his only living relative, and these men had been trying to steal the claim for weeks. "I'd rather die than give this to you," she called back, her voice stronger than she felt. The heels of her boots sent small rocks tumbling over the edge of the cliff behind her. The 100-foot drop made her dizzy. Porter's yellowed smile widened as he dismounted his horse. "That can be arranged, Miss Benson." The outlaws fanned out in a semicircle, cutting off any possibility of escape. Amelia had fled town after discovering that the local sheriff had been paid to look the other way while Porter and his gang terrorized anyone who stood between them and the richest silver veins in the territory. "Last chance," Porter said, drawing his pistol. Just as Amelia prepared to make a desperate final stand, a rifle shot cracked through the air. Porter's gun flew from his hand, and he howled in pain. "I believe the lady said no." The deep voice came from behind a cluster of boulders to the east. All heads turned to see a lone rider emerging from the dust, rifle raised, his face shadowed by a well-worn Stetson. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, pranced forward with purposeful steps. "This ain't your fight, stranger," Porter growled, nursing his bleeding hand. "I'm making it my fight," the newcomer replied, advancing steadily. 5 men against 1 woman doesn't seem sporting. As he rode closer, Amelia could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His duster coat billowed in the wind, revealing a gun belt worn with the ease of a man accustomed to its weight. "Name's Kieran Yates," he announced, his voice carrying across the rocky terrain. "And I'm giving you boys 1 chance to ride away." Porter spat on the ground. "There's 5 of us and 1 of you, Yates." "Poor odds," Kieran agreed with a slight smile. "For you." What happened next unfolded in a blur. Kieran's horse lunged forward as he fired 2 more shots in rapid succession. One outlaw fell from his saddle while another clutched his shoulder in agony. The remaining men scrambled for cover, firing wildly as Kieran drove his horse directly into their midst. Amelia watched in astonishment as he created chaos within their ranks. He wasn't just firing his weapon, he was using his horse as a battering ram, forcing the outlaws to scatter and breaking their formation. With precision born of experience, he was carving a path through their blockade. "Miss," he shouted to her, "when I call, run for my horse." Kieran fired again, hitting another outlaw in the leg. Porter and his remaining man were now separated, 1 on each side of the path Kieran had created. "Now," Kieran called, extending his arm toward her. Amelia didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward as bullets whizzed past her ears. With a strength born of desperation, she grasped Kieran's outstretched arm. He swung her up behind him in one fluid motion, never losing control of his horse. "Hold tight," he commanded as she wrapped her arms around his waist. The chestnut stallion pivoted and leapt forward, thundering through the gap between the disoriented outlaws. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels, but they were moving too quickly to make easy targets. Kieran fired once more over his shoulder, and Amelia heard a cry of pain behind them. They galloped away from the cliff edge, the horse's powerful muscles propelling them across the rugged terrain. Amelia clung to Kieran's solid form, her face pressed against his back as the wind tore at her hair. Only when the sounds of gunfire faded into the distance did she dare to breathe. "They'll follow," Kieran said over his shoulder, not slowing their pace. "But I know these hills better than they do." "Thank you," Amelia managed to say, her voice shaking. "You saved my life." "Let's hold off on the thanks until we're truly safe," he replied, guiding his horse into a narrow canyon that Amelia hadn't noticed before. "Those are Porter's boys. They don't give up easy." "How do you know Porter?" "Most folks around these parts know to steer clear of Silas Porter." "The question is, what did you do to rile him up so bad he'd corner you at Devil's Gorge?" Amelia clutched her satchel tighter. "He wants my uncle's silver claim, the Silver Moon Mine." Kieran's back stiffened under her hands. "You're Jeremiah Benson's niece. You knew my uncle." Everyone in Humboldt knew Jeremiah. Good man. Fair. Was right sorry to hear about his passing. The canyon narrowed further, forcing the horse to slow to a careful walk. Sunlight barely penetrated between the high walls of red rock. "Where are we going?" Amelia asked. "I've got a cabin about 3 miles from here. We'll be safe there while we figure out our next move." "Our next move? Mr. Yates, I appreciate your help, but—" "Kieran," he interrupted. "And if you think Porter's going to let this go, you're mistaken. That man's been after the Silver Moon for years. Your uncle refused to sell, even when Porter tried to intimidate him. Now Porter figures with Jeremiah gone. He can scare you into handing it over." "That's not going to happen," Amelia said firmly. "Uncle Jeremiah built that mine from nothing. His last letter said it was finally yielding enough silver to make all his years of work worthwhile. I won't let these criminals steal it." Kieran glanced back at her, and for the first time, she saw admiration in his gray eyes. "You've got grit, Miss Benson. You'll need it." "Amelia," she corrected. "And I have more than just grit, Mr. Yates. I have the law on my side." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Law doesn't reach far in these parts, and from what I hear, Sheriff Dawson is deep in Porter's pocket. Then I'll go to the federal marshal in Carson City." "That's a plan," Kieran agreed. "But first, we need to make sure you live long enough to get there." They emerged from the canyon into a small, hidden valley nestled among the hills. A stream ran through it, feeding a small stand of cottonwood trees. Beneath their shelter sat a modest log cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. "You're expecting someone?" Amelia asked, noticing the smoke. "My friend Jacob checks in on the place when I'm away. He must be inside." As they approached the cabin, the door opened to reveal an older man with a white beard and a friendly face lined with years in the sun. He carried a shotgun but lowered it upon recognizing Kieran. "Was wondering when you'd show up," Jacob called out. "Heard gunshots." "Ran into some trouble," Kieran replied, dismounting before helping Amelia down. "Miss Amelia Benson, meet Jacob Winters. Best tracker in Nevada territory and a decent cook when he puts his mind to it." Jacob's eyes widened at her name. "Jeremiah's niece. Well, I'll be." "You're the spitting image of your mother in her youth." Amelia stared at him in surprise. "You knew my mother. Met her when she came out to visit your uncle, oh, must be 20 years back now, before she married your father and moved east." The revelation startled Amelia. Her mother had rarely spoken of her life before Boston, and she had died when Amelia was just 14, taking many of her secrets to the grave. "Come inside," Jacob urged, glancing at the horizon. "Night's coming and it gets cold quick up here." The cabin's interior was simple but clean, with a large fireplace dominating one wall. A pot of stew bubbled over the flames, filling the room with a savory aroma that reminded Amelia she hadn't eaten since morning. "Porter's gang cornered her at Devil's Gorge," Kieran explained to Jacob as he hung his hat on a peg by the door. "There after Jeremiah's claim." Jacob shook his head. "Figured that might happen. Porter's been saying all over town that the Silver Moon rightfully belongs to him, that Jeremiah stole the location from him years back." "That's a lie," Amelia said firmly. "Uncle Jeremiah wrote to me often. He discovered that silver vein himself after 2 years of searching. He nearly died in a cave-in while establishing the first shaft." "Truth doesn't matter much to Porter," Jacob said, ladling stew into bowls. "He wants that mine, and he'll spin whatever tale helps him get it." They sat at the rough-hewn table, and Amelia found herself studying Kieran as he ate. His movements were efficient, his eyes constantly moving between the windows and the door. He had the watchful demeanor of someone used to danger. "How did you happen to find me?" she asked suddenly. "At the cliff." Kieran exchanged a glance with Jacob before answering. "I was heading back to town when I heard a horse running hard. Followed the sound and spotted you with Porter in pursuit. Decided to take a shortcut and get ahead of you." It was a reasonable explanation, but something in his tone suggested there was more to the story. Before Amelia could press further, Jacob spoke up. "Been meaning to tell you, Kieran. Marshall Turner is supposed to be coming through Humboldt next week. Might be worth sticking around for." Kieran nodded slowly. "That could work in our favor. If we can get Miss Benson to the marshal, he might be able to sort this out properly. Until then," Jacob continued, "you two should lie low. Porter's not likely to give up, and he's got too many friends in Humboldt." "I can't hide for a week," Amelia protested. "The deed needs to be registered at the county office, or Porter might try to claim the mine has been abandoned." "Already been registered," Jacob assured her. "Jeremiah made sure of that before he passed. Named you specifically in all the paperwork. It's legal and binding." Relief washed over Amelia. "Then all I need to do is speak to this Marshall Turner when he arrives." "And stay alive until then," Kieran added grimly. Outside, the wind had picked up, moaning through the pines surrounding the cabin. Jacob moved to stoke the fire, and Kieran stood to check the security of the door and windows. Amelia watched him move with the silent grace of a predator, his lean strength evident in every gesture. "You seem very capable with a gun, Mr. Yates," she observed. A shadow crossed his face. "Had to be. This territory doesn't forgive weakness. Are you a lawman?" Jacob chuckled from his position by the fire. "Kieran. No, miss, he's not exactly on friendly terms with badges." Kieran shot his friend a warning look. "I was a scout for the cavalry for a time. Then did some private security work for the railroads. These days I mostly keep to myself, except when I see 5 men about to murder a lady." There was something in his voice that suggested painful memories, but Amelia didn't press. She had her own ghosts, after all. The death of her parents had left her alone in the world until Uncle Jeremiah's letters had become her lifeline to family. Now he was gone too, and she was determined to honor his legacy by preserving what he had built. "I should turn in," she said, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion that had settled over her. "It's been a very long day," Jacob nodded. "You can take the bedroom. Kieran and I will bunk out here." "I couldn't possibly." "It's no trouble," Kieran insisted. "You need proper rest." The small bedroom was neat, with a quilt-covered bed and a chest of drawers. A worn book of poetry sat on the nightstand. Amelia ran her fingers over the leather cover, wondering if it belonged to Kieran. It seemed at odds with his rugged exterior. As she settled into bed, still fully clothed except for her boots, she could hear the low murmur of conversation between the two men in the other room. She strained to catch their words. "Risky business, getting involved," Jacob was saying. "Couldn't just ride away," Kieran replied. "Because of Jeremiah, partly. Man saved my life once. Owe him that much. And the fact she's pretty as a sunrise has nothing to do with it." Kieran's response was too low to hear, but Jacob's chuckle suggested it had been defensive. Amelia felt her cheeks warm at the implication. Certainly, Kieran Yates was an attractive man, but she had more pressing concerns than romantic notions. Still, as sleep claimed her, she couldn't help but remember the security of his solid presence when she'd clung to him during their escape. The morning arrived with golden light streaming through the small window. Amelia woke disoriented before the events of the previous day came rushing back. She quickly straightened her rumpled clothing and attempted to tame her hair before emerging from the bedroom. The main room was empty, but the door stood open. Outside, she found Kieran chopping wood with powerful, efficient strokes. His shirt was damp with exertion, clinging to the muscles of his back. He paused when he noticed her. "Morning," he said, embedding the axe in the chopping block. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Where's Jacob?" Checking our back trail. "Wanted to make sure Porter didn't manage to track us here overnight." Amelia nodded, taking in the peaceful valley in the morning light. "It's beautiful here." "It is," Kieran agreed, his expression softening. "Found this place about 5 years ago. Built the cabin myself." He hesitated before adding, "Your uncle helped, actually. Good with his hands, Jeremiah was. He never mentioned you in his letters," Amelia said, puzzled. A shadow passed over Kieran's face. "We had a complicated relationship toward the end." Before she could ask more, Jacob appeared around the side of the cabin, his expression grim. "Riders," he announced without preamble. "About an hour out, 6 of them." Kieran's face hardened. "Porter found a replacement for the man I shot." "How?" Amelia asked. "You said no one could track us here." "Someone talked," Jacob said grimly. "Town's not that big. Someone saw which direction Kieran rode yesterday and sold the information." "We need to move," Kieran decided, already heading inside. "Jacob, get the horses ready." "Miss Benson, gather your things." Inside the cabin, Kieran quickly collected supplies, filling saddlebags with ammunition, food, and water. Amelia clutched her satchel, ensuring the mine deed was still secure. "Where will we go?" she asked. "I know a place," Kieran replied, checking his revolver before holstering it. "Old mining cabin about 20 miles east. We can hole up there until the marshal arrives." Jacob appeared in the doorway. "Horses are ready, but we need to split up. I'll head north, create a false trail for them to follow." Kieran nodded. "Meet us at Carson's Ridge in 3 days if you can, if not." "I know," Jacob said with a grim smile. "Been dodging trouble longer than you've been alive, boy." The two men clasped arms briefly before Jacob turned to Amelia. "You keep this stubborn mule in line, Miss Benson. Don't let him take any unnecessary risks." "I'll do my best," she promised. They left the cabin minutes later, Jacob heading north while Kieran and Amelia rode east through a narrow mountain pass. The chestnut stallion carried them both, moving with surprising speed despite the double burden. "Your horse is magnificent," Amelia commented as they navigated a steep section of trail. "What's his name?" "Copper," Kieran replied. "Raised him from a colt. Most loyal partner I've ever had." They rode in silence for a time, the only sounds the rhythm of hooves and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Amelia found herself acutely aware of Kieran's proximity, her arms wrapped around his waist, her chest pressed against his back. "How did you meet my uncle?" she asked, hoping conversation would distract her from their intimate position. Kieran was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low enough that she had to lean closer to hear. "I was in a bad way when Jeremiah found me. Shot up, half dead in a ravine not far from his claim. He could have left me, most would have. Instead, he brought me to his cabin, patched me up, gave me work when I healed." "That sounds like Uncle Jeremiah. He always believed in helping others." "He was a good man," Kieran agreed. "One of the few I've known." "You said your relationship became complicated." "Why?" Kieran sighed, the sound vibrating through his back against her chest. "About 2 years ago, I got involved with something I shouldn't have. Made choices Jeremiah couldn't abide. We parted ways. Last time I saw him was 6 months ago, just before he got sick. We made our peace, but he trailed off and Amelia didn't push. Everyone had regrets, after all. She knew that better than most." Around midday, they paused in a sheltered grove to rest Copper and eat some of the jerky and biscuits Jacob had packed. Amelia stretched her legs, wincing at the stiffness from hours of riding. "Not used to horseback?" Kieran asked, noticing her discomfort. "Not for such distances," she admitted. "In Boston, I rarely had cause to ride at all." "What brought you out here, then?" "Most Eastern ladies wouldn't venture west of the Mississippi, let alone into Nevada territory." Amelia took a sip from the canteen before answering. "After my parents died, Uncle Jeremiah was my only family. We corresponded regularly. When he fell ill, I wanted to come see him, but his letters insisted I stay put. Said he'd visit me in Boston once he'd struck it rich enough to travel in style. Then I received word of his death, and the news that he'd left everything to me." "Including Porter's animosity," Kieran noted. "I didn't anticipate that," she admitted. "The lawyer who contacted me mentioned nothing about disputes over the claim." "Lawyers rarely tell the whole truth," Kieran said with a hint of bitterness. "What will you do with the mine?" "Sell it and return east." The question caught Amelia off guard. She hadn't thought that far ahead, focused as she'd been on simply claiming her inheritance. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Uncle Jeremiah loved that mine. It was his life's work. Selling it feels like a betrayal of his memory. But staying means running it yourself. Not an easy life for anyone, let alone a woman alone." Amelia bristled at his tone. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Yates, and being a woman doesn't make me incapable of managing a business." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Just stating facts about the territory. It's rough country and mining is rougher still." "Then perhaps I need to learn," she said firmly. "Uncle Jeremiah believed in me enough to leave me his legacy. I won't throw that away without at least trying to honor it." Kieran studied her with those stormy gray eyes, something like respect kindling in their depths. "Your uncle would be proud to hear you say that." They continued their journey through increasingly rugged terrain. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, and a distant rumble of thunder warned of an approaching storm. "We need to pick up the pace," Kieran said, eyeing the sky. "That storm looks nasty, and we're still a good 2 hours from shelter." They pushed Copper harder, the stallion responding gamely to Kieran's urging. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of electrical fury. The first fat droplets began to fall just as they crested a ridge overlooking a deep valley. "There," Kieran pointed toward a stand of pine trees on the far side. "The cabin's just beyond that tree line." The rain intensified rapidly, soaking them within minutes. Lightning split the sky, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Copper shied nervously, and Kieran soothed him with gentle words and a steady hand. By the time they reached the trees, the storm had become a deluge. They dismounted at a small, dilapidated cabin nestled against the hillside. It was little more than a single room with a slumped roof, but it offered shelter from the elements. Kieran led Copper to a lean-to at the side of the cabin. "Get inside," he called to Amelia over the roar of the storm. "I'll take care of Copper." Inside, the cabin was musty but dry. A small stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a narrow bed frame stood in the corner, its mattress long gone. Amelia set down her satchel and began searching for anything to start a fire. Kieran joined her minutes later, water streaming from his duster. He shrugged it off and hung it on a peg by the door. "Found some dry wood under the lean-to," he said, dropping an armload of logs by the fireplace. From his saddlebag, he produced a tinderbox. "Let's get a fire going before we freeze." They worked together in silence, Kieran building the fire while Amelia cleared years of dust from the small table and single chair. Once flames were crackling in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the walls, Kieran surveyed the cabin with a critical eye. "Not much, but it'll keep us dry. No one's used this place in years. Was part of the Broken Spur mine operation before it played out." "Will we be safe here?" Amelia asked, moving closer to the fire's warmth. "Safe enough. Storm will wash away our tracks. Even if Porter's men guess which direction we took, they'd have a hard time finding this particular cabin." Amelia nodded, suddenly very aware of their isolation and proximity. Her clothes clung to her, and she shivered despite the fire's heat. "You should get out of those wet things," Kieran said, noticing her discomfort. He turned to his saddlebag and pulled out a clean, if wrinkled, shirt. "It's not much, but it's dry. I'll step outside while you change." "In this storm, don't be ridiculous," Amelia protested. "Just turn your back." Kieran complied without argument, facing the door while Amelia quickly stripped off her sodden blouse and skirt. His shirt hung nearly to her knees, the fabric rough but warm against her skin. She spread her wet garments near the fire to dry. "You can turn around now," she said, feeling oddly vulnerable in his clothes. Kieran turned, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of her before he quickly schooled his features. "Better. Much, thank you." She gestured to his own wet clothing. "You should do the same." He hesitated, then nodded. "Fair's fair. Your turn to look away." Amelia obediently turned toward the fire, listening to the rustle of fabric as he changed. Despite her resolve not to peek, she found herself glancing over her shoulder. The firelight played across his bare torso, illuminating a map of scars that told of a hard life. One particularly vicious mark curved around his ribs, a bullet wound, she guessed. He caught her looking and paused, holding her gaze for a long moment before pulling on a dry undershirt. "You can turn back now," he said softly. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted, charged with something beyond the electricity of the storm outside. Amelia busied herself arranging their meager supplies on the table while Kieran secured the cabin's single window. "We should eat something," he suggested, producing a small parcel of food from his saddlebag. "Not much, but it'll tide us over until morning." They shared a simple meal of jerky, hard biscuits, and dried apples beside the fire, the storm raging outside. As night fell, the temperature dropped further, and Amelia found herself inching closer to both the fire and Kieran's warmth. "You mentioned you were a scout for the cavalry," she said, seeking conversation to distract from their circumstances. "Was that during the war?" Kieran nodded, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "Enlisted in '62 when I was 18. Too young to know better. Saw things no one should see, did things." He trailed off, his expression distant. "After, I couldn't settle back into normal life. The Army hired me to scout in the territories. I knew the land, could track, spoke a little Paiute and Shoshone. Useful skills out here." Is that how you ended up in Nevada? Partly. Was tracking a group of deserters who'd taken to robbing stage coaches. Trail led me here. When the job was done, I stayed. And then you met my uncle. A small smile softened his features. Jeremiah had a way of taking in strays, said I reminded him of his younger brother, your father, I guess. Amelia felt a pang of loss. I barely knew my father. He was often away on business. Died in a steamboat accident when I was 12. I'm sorry, Kieran said quietly. Loss has a way of shaping us for better or worse. They fell into silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and the storm outside. As the night deepened, the cold intensified despite the fire. Amelia couldn't suppress a shiver. Here, Kieran said, noticing her discomfort. He unrolled his bedroll next to the fire. Take this, I'll be fine. There's only one bedroll, Amelia pointed out, and you need rest as much as I do. Kieran shook his head. I've slept in worse conditions. The chair will do. Don't be foolish, she said firmly. The bedroll is large enough for both of us if we stay close. It's merely practical in these circumstances. Kieran's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't argue. If you're sure. I am, she said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. They arranged themselves awkwardly on the bedroll, back to back at first, both rigid with awareness. But as the night grew colder and the fire began to die down, they inevitably shifted closer for warmth. Amelia found herself turning toward him, her forehead pressed against his broad back, her knees tucked behind his. Amelia, Kieran whispered into the darkness, you should know something. What is it? She murmured, half asleep already. I didn't just happen to find you yesterday. I've been watching Porter and his men since they started causing trouble at the Silver Moon. I was heading there to check on things when I saw them chasing you. Amelia was fully awake now. Why would you be watching the mine? He was silent for a long moment. Jeremiah asked me to before he died. Made me promise I'd keep an eye out when his niece came to claim it. Said you might need help, though he hoped you wouldn't. You've been protecting me all along, she realized. Trying to, he admitted. Not doing a great job considering you ended up cornered at Devil's Gorge. You saved my life, Amelia reminded him, touched by the knowledge that her uncle had arranged for her protection even after his death. That seems like success to me. Outside, the storm began to subside, the thunder growing distant. Inside the cabin, something new and fragile was taking root between them, something neither had expected to find in these dangerous circumstances. Get some sleep, Kieran said softly. Tomorrow will be another long day. Morning brought watery sunshine and the fresh scent of rain washed earth. Amelia woke to find herself alone on the bedroll, the cabin door standing open. Outside, Kieran was tending to Copper, his back to her as she approached. Good morning, she called. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Morning. Storms past. Should be good traveling weather. Where are we headed today? There's a small settlement about 15 miles east Pinewood Springs. Friend of mine runs the general store. We can resupply there, maybe get word to Jacob about our whereabouts. Is it safe? Amelia asked, remembering Porter's reach. Safer than most places. Porter's not well liked in Pinewood Springs. He tried to muscle in on some mining claims there last year and got run out of town at gunpoint. They set out after a quick breakfast, Copper moving easily through the mud-slicked trails. The world seemed renewed after the storm, wildflowers beginning to peek through the wet earth, birds calling in the clear air. It's beautiful here, Amelia commented as they passed through a meadow dotted with purple lupines. I can see why Uncle Jeremiah loved it so much. Kieran glanced back at her. Different from Boston, I imagine. Very, but there's something honest about this land. Raw and untamed, but true in a way the city never was. Most people who come west see only the hardship, Kieran observed. They miss the beauty. Perhaps it takes both eyes to see completely, Amelia suggested. One for the hardship, one for the beauty. Kieran's laugh surprised her, a rich, genuine sound she hadn't heard from him before. You sound like Jeremiah now. He was always saying things like that. The day warmed as they rode, and by noon they had covered nearly half the distance to Pinewood Springs. They stopped to rest near a clear stream, allowing Copper to drink while they stretched their legs. May I ask you something personal? Amelia ventured as they shared a small meal. Kieran looked wary but nodded. You said you and my uncle had a falling out because you got involved in something he couldn't abide. What was it? Kieran stared into the distance, his jaw tight. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. 2 years ago, I took a job as hired security for a man named Victor Holloway. He owned several businesses in Carson City, including a saloon. Paid well, asked few questions. I later discovered he was using his businesses to launder money from a counterfeiting operation. By then, I was in deep. When federal agents came asking questions, I kept my mouth shut. Were you arrested? No, but Jeremiah knew what Holloway was, knew I was protecting him, called me a coward for not standing up for what was right. Kieran's voice turned bitter. He wasn't wrong. What happened to Holloway? Eventually got caught, went to prison. I walked away with my freedom but lost your uncle's respect. Took a long time to earn it back. But you did, eventually, Amelia pointed out. He trusted you to protect me, after all. Kieran met her eyes. I'm trying to be the man Jeremiah thought I could be. Not sure I'm succeeding. From what I've seen, you're doing just fine, Amelia said softly. Something shifted in Kieran's expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, quickly masked as he stood and offered her a hand up. We should keep moving. I'd like to reach Pinewood Springs before dark. The rest of the journey passed mostly in companionable silence. As promised, they reached the settlement by late afternoon. Pinewood Springs was little more than a cluster of buildings serving the surrounding homesteads and small mining operations, a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a scattering of houses. Kieran led them directly to the general store, a sturdy 2-story building with a covered porch. An older woman with iron-gray hair was sweeping the steps as they approached. Kieran Yates, as I live and breathe, she called out, setting aside her broom. Been wondering if we'd see you again. Hello, Martha, Kieran replied, dismounting before helping Amelia down. This is Miss Amelia Benson, Jeremiah's niece. Martha's weathered face softened. Jeremiah's girl. Well, you're welcome here, child. I was sorry to hear about your uncle, fine man. Thank you, Amelia said, liking the forthright woman immediately. We need a place to stay the night, Kieran explained, and some supplies. Having a bit of trouble with Sela's porter. Martha's expression darkened. That snake. Come inside, both of you. Timothy's just back from Carson City with news you'll want to hear. Inside, the store was well stocked with everything from tools to fabric to canned goods. Behind the counter stood a tall, lean man with spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up as they entered, his face breaking into a smile. Kieran, perfect timing, was about to send a rider to find you. What's happened, Timothy? Kieran asked, tension evident in his stance. Marshall Turner arrived in Carson City 3 days early. He's on his way to Humboldt now, should arrive by tomorrow noon. And he's bringing deputies with him. Seems there's been enough complaints about Porter to warrant federal attention. Hope flared in Amelia's chest. That's wonderful news. Kieran didn't look as convinced. Porter will know by now. He won't take this lying down. Timothy nodded grimly. That's the other news. Word is Porter's gathered his gang and more besides. Talk in Carson City is that he's planning something big before the marshal arrives. "The mine," Amelia said with sudden certainty. "He's going to try to take the mine by force and destroy any evidence of his claim jumping before the law arrives," Kieran added. "We need to warn the workers at the Silver Moon." "They already know," Timothy assured him. "I sent a rider yesterday." "But they're just miners, not gunmen. If Porter comes with his full gang, then we need to get there first," Kieran decided. "Tonight, tonight," Amelia repeated. "But Copper is exhausted and it's at least 20 miles back to Humboldt." 25 to the mine itself, Kieran corrected. "And we won't be taking Copper. Timothy, I need to borrow 2 fresh horses." "Of course," Timothy agreed. "Take the Bay and the Black. Both are strong and fast." "We'll need ammunition too," Kieran continued, already calculating what they would need. "And I want to send a message to Jacob if he shows up." While the men discussed logistics, Martha drew Amelia aside. "Come upstairs, dear. I have some clean clothes that might fit you and you can wash up before you head out again." Upstairs, in a neat bedroom that smelled of lavender, Martha provided Amelia with a practical riding outfit: split skirt, sturdy blouse, and a warm jacket. "These belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Sacramento," Martha explained. "About your size, I'd say." "Thank you," Amelia said gratefully, changing quickly. "This is much better for riding." "You care for him, don't you?" Martha asked suddenly, her shrewd eyes kind. Amelia felt her cheeks warm. "I hardly know him." "Sometimes it doesn't take long to know what matters," Martha replied with a small smile. "I saw my Timothy once at a church social and knew he was the one for me. Married him 3 weeks later. Been together 42 years now." "I'm not thinking of marriage," Amelia protested. "We're just trying to survive Porter and his men." "Of course," Martha said, not sounding convinced at all. "But when the danger's past, you might consider what you really want. Kieran's a good man, despite his rough edges." Amelia busied herself with tying back her hair to hide her confusion. In truth, she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. Coming west had changed something fundamental within her. The proper Boston music teacher seemed like a stranger now, a life that belonged to someone else. When she returned downstairs, Kieran was checking the loading of a rifle. He glanced up at her new attire, approval evident in his eyes. "Ready to ride?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied with more confidence than she felt. They set out as dusk was falling, mounted on the fresh horses Timothy had provided. The night air was cool and clear, stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. They rode hard, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. "Porter will likely attack at dawn," Kieran explained during one such stop. "It's when the night shift is ending and the day shift hasn't fully started." "The mine will be vulnerable. How many men does he have?" Timothy heard at least 10, possibly more if he's hired guns from outside the territory. Amelia's stomach tightened with fear. "And at the mine?" "Maybe 15 miners, but as Timothy said, they're not fighters." "The foreman, Ellis, has a shotgun. Maybe a few of the others have revolvers, but they won't stand a chance against Porter's gang." "Then why are we rushing toward danger instead of waiting for the marshal?" Kieran's expression was grim in the moonlight. "Because if Porter destroys the mine or kills the workers, having legal ownership won't matter much. And because those men stayed loyal to your uncle, they deserve better than to be abandoned." They rode on through the night, the miles passing beneath their horses' hooves. Amelia's body ached from 2 days of hard riding, but she refused to complain. As the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, Kieran pointed to a ridge ahead. "The silver moon is just beyond that rise," he said. "We need to approach carefully. Porter may already have men in position." They dismounted and secured the horses in a stand of trees, then continued on foot, moving stealthily through the underbrush. At the top of the ridge, They lay flat on their stomachs, peering down at the mine entrance below. The Silver Moon was a modest operation, a timber-reinforced tunnel cut into the hillside, with a series of small buildings clustered nearby. A bunkhouse for the miners, a storage shed, an office, and a small cabin that had been Jeremiah's home. A stream ran nearby, powering a water wheel that operated the mine's primitive pumping system. In the pre-dawn gloom, Amelia could make out movement men taking up positions around the perimeter of the mine. They weren't miners. Porter's men, Kieran whispered. They're already here. Amelia counted at least 8 armed men surrounding the buildings. What do we do? I need to warn the miners before they walk into an ambush, Kieran said. And you need to stay here out of sight. I'm coming with you, Amelia insisted. It's too dangerous. It's my mine, she countered. My responsibility. Uncle Jeremiah would expect me to defend it. Kieran studied her face in the growing light, then nodded reluctantly. Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. They retreated from the ridge and circled around to approach the mine from behind, using the stream as cover. The rush of water masked their movements as they crept closer to the bunkhouse. Kieran pointed to a back window that stood slightly ajar. I'll go in first, he whispered. Wait for my signal. He moved silently to the window and tapped lightly on the glass. After a moment, a weathered face appeared, a man in his 60s with a grizzled beard. Ellis, Kieran mouthed. Recognition dawned on the older man's face, and he quickly opened the window wider. Kieran slipped inside, then reached back to help Amelia through. Inside the bunkhouse, about a dozen miners were preparing for the day shift. They froze at the sight of the newcomers. Porter's men have the place surrounded, Kieran said without preamble. At least 8 of them, armed and waiting. Ellis, evidently the foreman Kieran had mentioned, cursed softly. We heard rumors he might try something, but we didn't expect it so soon. The marshal is on his way to Humboldt, Amelia explained quickly. He should arrive by noon. Porter knows his time is running out. Miss Benson. Ellis asked, recognition dawning. Jeremiah's niece. Yes, she confirmed. And I need your help to defend what my uncle built. The miners exchanged glances, uncertainty evident in their expressions. One spoke up. We're not gunfighters, miss. We're just working men. I'm not asking you to fight, Amelia said. Just to hold out until the marshal arrives. This mine is your livelihood as much as it is my inheritance. Ellis nodded slowly. The lady's right. Jeremiah treated us fair when other mine owners worked men to death. We owe him this much. He turned to Kieran. What's the plan? Kieran moved to the window, assessing the situation outside. Dawn's breaking. They'll make their move soon. How many guns do you have? 3 revolvers and my shotgun, Ellis replied. Plus whatever you brought. I have my rifle and revolver, Kieran said. Timothy gave me extra ammunition. Not enough to hold off 10 armed men, a miner pointed out. We don't need to defeat them, Kieran explained. Just delay them until the marshal arrives. And we have one advantage they don't know about. They don't realize we're here. They think they're surprising sleeping miners. He quickly outlined a plan. The miners would stay inside the bunkhouse, barricading the doors and windows. Kieran would position himself in Jeremiah's cabin, which overlooked the main approach to the mine. When Porter and his men made their move, Kieran would open fire, creating confusion. The miners would then fire from the bunkhouse, giving the impression of greater numbers. What about me? Amelia asked. You'll stay here with Ellis, Kieran instructed. It's the safest place. Amelia was about to protest when a shout outside caught their attention. Through a crack in the window shutters, they could see Silas Porter himself riding into the clearing, flanked by several armed men. Time's up, Kieran muttered. I need to get to the cabin now. I'm coming with you, Amelia said firmly. Kieran opened his mouth to argue, then closed it at the determination in her eyes. "Stay low, move fast, and do exactly as I say." They slipped out the back window while the miners hurriedly barricaded the bunkhouse. Keeping to the shadows, they darted toward Jeremiah's cabin, 50 yards away. They were halfway there when a shot rang out, kicking up dirt at their feet. "Run!" Kieran shouted, pulling his revolver and firing back at their attacker. They sprinted for the cabin, bullets whizzing past them. Kieran shoved Amelia through the door first, then followed, slamming it shut behind them. He immediately moved to the window, rifle at the ready. "They know we're here now," he said grimly. "Get down and stay away from the windows." Outside, Porter's voice bellowed across the clearing. "I know you're in there, Yates. You and the Benson woman. Come out now and maybe I'll let you live." "We just need to hold out until noon," Kieran reminded her, checking his rifle. "That's when the marshal should arrive." "And if he's delayed?" Amelia asked, crouching behind a sturdy table. "Then we fight as long as we can," Kieran replied simply. A volley of gunfire erupted from outside, bullets splintering the cabin's wooden walls. Kieran returned fire methodically, aiming at Porter's men who had taken positions behind rocks and trees. From the bunkhouse, the miners began firing as well, forcing the attackers to divide their attention. The exchange continued for nearly an hour, neither side gaining advantage. Then Porter changed tactics. Amelia smelled smoke before she saw the flames licking at the side of the cabin. "They're trying to burn us out," she called to Kieran, who was still exchanging fire with the men outside. He cursed, glancing at the spreading flames. "We need to move. This place will be an inferno in minutes." "Where can we go?" Kieran thought quickly. "The mine tunnel. It's our only option. They won't follow us in there too easy to get ambushed in the darkness." "But we'll be trapped," Amelia pointed out. "Better trapped than dead," Kieran replied grimly. "And the tunnel has side passages. We might be able to circle back behind them." As the fire spread, the cabin filled with smoke. They crawled to the back door, staying low. Outside, gunfire continued to erupt sporadically from the bunkhouse, keeping some of Porter's men pinned down. "Ready?" Kieran asked, gripping her hand tightly. "We'll have to run for it. The mine entrance is 100 yards away across open ground." Amelia nodded, her heart pounding. "I'm ready." Kieran kicked open the door and they burst out together, running full tilt toward the dark mouth of the mine tunnel. Shouts went up from Porter's men, followed by a hail of bullets. Kieran zigzagged, pulling Amelia with him, using what cover they could find. They were 20 yards from the tunnel when Kieran suddenly stumbled, nearly pulling Amelia down with him. He regained his footing immediately, but not before she saw the dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. "You're hit," she gasped. "Keep moving," he ordered, pushing her ahead of him. They reached the mine entrance and plunged into its darkness, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Inside, the air was cool and damp, the passage supported by heavy timber bracing. Kieran leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "How bad is it?" Amelia asked, trying to examine his wound in the dim light filtering from the entrance. "Just a graze," he insisted, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "We need to keep moving. There should be lanterns and matches in the first supply alcove." They moved deeper into the tunnel, feeling their way along the wall until they found the alcove Kieran had mentioned. Amelia located a lantern and matches, and soon a warm glow illuminated their surroundings. "Let me see that shoulder," she insisted, setting the lantern on a crate. Reluctantly, Kieran allowed her to examine the wound. The bullet had torn through the muscle of his upper arm, leaving an ugly furrow that bled freely. Not life-threatening, but certainly painful and debilitating if not treated. "I need to bind this," she said, tearing a strip from her petticoat. "It's not just a graze, Kieran." He submitted to her ministrations, watching her face as she worked. "You're good at this." "I volunteered at a hospital in Boston during the last year of the war," she explained, tying off the bandage. "Learned more than I ever wanted about bullet wounds." A commotion at the tunnel entrance interrupted them, shouts and the sound of approaching footsteps. "They're coming in after us," Kieran said, drawing his revolver. "We need to move deeper. There's a junction about 50 yards ahead where the tunnel splits. We can lose them there." They hurried forward, the lantern casting dancing shadows on the rough walls. Behind them, the voices grew louder. At the junction, Kieran paused. "Left leads to the main shaft. Right goes to an older section that Jeremiah abandoned last year when the vein played out. Porter's men will expect us to go left. Then we go right," Amelia decided. The right passage narrowed and descended, the air growing thicker with dust and the musty smell of disuse. They had gone perhaps 200 yards when the tunnel ended abruptly in a cave-in. "Dead end," Amelia whispered, dismayed. Kieran raised the lantern, examining the collapse. "Not entirely. Look." Above the fallen rocks, a narrow opening led to what appeared to be another passage. Kieran tested the debris pile, finding it relatively stable. "I'll go first," he said, holstering his revolver. "If it's safe, I'll help you up." Despite his injured arm, he climbed nimbly up the rockfall and squeezed through the opening. After a moment, his hand reappeared, reaching down for her. "It's clear," he called softly. "There's a whole network of natural caverns back here." Amelia scrambled up after him, accepting his hand. On the other side, she found herself in a limestone cavern that dwarfed the man-made tunnel. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the vast space. "Jeremiah mentioned finding these caves," Kieran said, his voice hushed. "Said they ran for miles under the mountains. That's why he staked his claim here, figured where nature made one treasure, another might be nearby." "It's beautiful," Amelia breathed, the lantern light reflecting off crystal formations embedded in the walls. Distant shouts reminded them of their pursuers. Kieran led her deeper into the cavern, following what appeared to be a natural pathway through the rock formations. The cavern narrowed, then opened again into an even larger chamber where an underground stream flowed across their path. "If we follow the water, it must lead somewhere," Amelia suggested. Kieran nodded, wincing as the movement jarred his wounded arm. Jeremiah's survey maps showed a spring on the other side of the ridge. This stream might connect to it. They followed the waterway, the footing treacherous on the slick rocks. After what seemed like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, they saw light ahead, a faint glimmer that grew brighter as they approached. The stream emerged from the mountainside as a small waterfall, cascading into a clear pool surrounded by pines. They had come out on the opposite side of the ridge from the mine, in a secluded valley hidden from casual view. "We made it," Amelia said with relief, turning to Kieran. Her relief turned to alarm when she saw he was leaning heavily against a boulder, his face ashen. "You're worse." "Lost more blood than I thought," he admitted. "Need to rest a minute." Amelia helped him to a flat rock beside the pool, where he sat heavily. She unwrapped her makeshift bandage to check the wound, dismayed to find it still bleeding steadily. "This needs proper treatment," she said, washing the wound with cool water from the pool. "And you need rest." "No time," he said, though he made no move to stand. "Porter's men will be searching for us, and we need to get back to the mine before the marshal arrives." "You're in no condition to go anywhere," Amelia insisted. "We'll wait here until you're stronger." "Porter could be destroying the mine right now," Kieran argued. "Everything your uncle worked for gone." Amelia's heart twisted at the thought, but she shook her head firmly. "The mine can be rebuilt. You can't be replaced." Something flickered in Kieran's eyes at her word's surprise, followed by a warmth that had nothing to do with his injury. Before he could respond, the distant sound of gunfire echoed across the valley. "That came from the direction of the mine," Kieran said, straightening despite his weakness. "Sounds like a lot of shooting." "The marshal," Amelia suggested hopefully. "Maybe. We need to find out." Kieran attempted to stand but swayed alarmingly. "You're staying here," Amelia said firmly, helping him back down. "I'll go scout ahead and come back for you." "Absolutely not," he protested. "It's too dangerous." "I can move more quietly alone and I won't engage anyone," she promised. "I'll just see what's happening and return immediately." Kieran looked deeply unhappy with the plan but was clearly in no condition to accompany her. "Take my revolver at least," he insisted, handing her the weapon. "And if you see Porter or his men, you turn around and come straight back. Promise me." "I promise," she said, accepting the revolver with more confidence than she felt. She followed the edge of the ridge, climbing carefully to a vantage point that overlooked the mine. What she saw made her heart leap. Several uniformed men were taking Porter's gang into custody. A tall man with a marshal's badge was reading from a document while Silas Porter, his hands cuffed behind his back, stood scowling nearby. Relief flooded through her. She quickly made her way back to Kieran, nearly stumbling in her haste to share the good news. "The marshal's there," she called as she approached the pool. "They've arrested Porter and his men." Kieran's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank God. Are the miners all right?" "I couldn't see clearly, but it looked like they were helping the marshal. The fighting is over." "Then we should get down there," Kieran said, struggling to his feet. This time, he managed to stay upright, though he leaned heavily on Amelia's shoulder. "The marshal will need your statement as the owner." They made their way slowly down the valley, following a game trail that eventually connected with the main road to the mine. As they approached, several of the miners spotted them and rushed to help, supporting Kieran while Amelia explained what had happened. Marshal Turner was a tall, stern-faced man with a thick mustache and keen eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Amelia's account without interruption, then nodded. "We've been building a case against Porter for months," he explained. "Claim jumping, extortion, assault, even murder, though we couldn't prove it. Your situation gave us the opportunity to catch him in the act." "My miners?" Amelia asked. "2 injured, none killed," the marshal assured her. "They put up a good fight until we arrived. And the mine?" "Some damage to the outbuildings, and they tried to collapse the main tunnel, but they didn't have time to do much harm. Your foreman says it can all be repaired within a week." Relief washed over Amelia. She looked for Kieran and found him being tended by one of the marshal's deputies who had medical training. Their eyes met across the busy clearing, and despite his pain, he smiled at her, a smile that conveyed more than words could say. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Porter and his gang were transported to Carson City to await trial, the damaged buildings were repaired, and mining operations resumed. Marshal Turner took formal statements from everyone involved before departing with a promise that Porter would face the full force of federal law. Amelia settled into her uncle's cabin, which had suffered only minor fire damage. She spent her days learning about the mine's operations from Ellis, who proved a patient teacher. The miners, initially skeptical of taking orders from a woman, gradually came to respect her intelligence and determination. Kieran, once his wound was properly treated, recovered quickly. He took to helping around the mine, offering suggestions for improved security and more efficient operations. He'd been a miner himself at one point, he explained, and understood the challenges of the work. In the evenings, they would sit on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. Their conversations ranged from Amelia's life in Boston to Kieran's adventures in the territories, from literature to philosophy to dreams of the future. With each passing day, the connection between them deepened into something neither had expected to find. A week after Porter's arrest, Jacob arrived at the mine, having heard the news in Pinewood Springs. He greeted Amelia like an old friend and clasped Kieran's arm warmly. "Knew you'd sort it out," he said with a grin. "Though I would have liked to help with the shooting." "One gun battle is enough excitement for me," Amelia laughed. "But I'm glad you're here. We're celebrating tonight the first significant silver strike since I took ownership." The celebration that evening was simple but joyful. The miners gathered around a bonfire, sharing stories and moonshine whiskey. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon music filled the night air. Jacob demonstrated a surprisingly spry jig for a man his age, much to everyone's delight. As the night deepened and the revelry continued, Kieran touched Amelia's elbow gently. "Walk with me," she nodded, following him away from the firelight to a quiet spot beneath the stars. The night was clear and cool, the moon casting silver light across the landscape. "I've been thinking," Kieran said after a moment's silence, "about what comes next." Amelia's heart tightened. "Are you leaving?" "That depends," he said, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his expression was open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "On what you want." "What I want," she echoed. "You've got a good operation here, the miners respect you, the silver vein is promising, you could make a real success of the silver moon." "But," she prompted, sensing there was more. "But Boston is your home. You have a life there, people who know you. This is still foreign territory to you." Amelia considered his words carefully. "I thought Boston was my home," she said slowly. "But these past weeks have changed something in me. The woman who taught music to proper young ladies seems like someone from a story I once read." Hope flickered in Kieran's eyes. "And the woman you are now, she belongs here," Amelia said simply. "In this wild, beautiful place, with these honest people who worked alongside my uncle, with—" She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "With you, if that's what you want too." Kieran stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I've never wanted anything more," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I need you to be sure. My past isn't spotless, Amelia. I've made mistakes." "We all have," she replied, squeezing his hands. "It's what we do next that matters." "What I want to do next," he said slowly, "is build something lasting. With you. Here at the Silver Moon, if that's what you want, or anywhere else that calls to you." "I can think of nowhere better," she whispered. Under the vast Nevada sky, with silver stars mirroring the precious metal beneath their feet, Kieran pulled her gently into his arms. His kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as she responded, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, careful of his healing wound. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the world seemed full of new possibilities. The future stretched before them, as rich with promise as a newly discovered silver vein. "Jeremiah would be pleased," Kieran murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "He sent you to me," Amelia replied. "I think he knew all along what might happen. Smart man, your uncle." "Very smart," she agreed with a soft laugh. "Now, are you going to kiss me again, or shall we rejoin the celebration?" "I vote for the first option," Kieran said, drawing her closer once more. The Silver Moon mine flourished under their joint stewardship. Amelia's head for business complemented Kieran's practical knowledge of mining operations, and together they expanded the operation thoughtfully, never sacrificing safety for profit. They were married the following spring in a ceremony attended by the miners, Jacob and Timothy, Martha, and even Marshall Turner, who had become a friend. 3 years later, their firstborn son arrived, a sturdy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Jeremiah, in honor of the man who had brought them together. On summer evenings, when the work was done, they would often sit on the porch of the expanded cabin, watching their son play while the sunset painted the mountains. Sometimes Amelia would think back to that desperate day at Devil's Gorge, where death had seemed certain until a lone rider appeared to carve a path through danger. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran would ask, noticing her distant smile. "About how sometimes the edge of a cliff isn't an ending," she would reply, taking his hand. "Sometimes it's just the beginning of the most remarkable journey." And as the stars emerged to shine down on the silver moon, Amelia Benson Yates would count herself the richest woman in Nevada territory, not for the silver beneath her feet, but for the love that had found her in the wildest of circumstances.